Howdy, students. We are going to start discussing evolution. Really, it is the central theme of practically all biology. The reason biological systems are the way they are is because they have evolved to be the way they are. And that's going to be a theme that we're going to come back to over and over and over again, which is why I start the year with this. We built tools, and this is going to be like a theme that we frame the rest of the year in. We're going to talk about Darwin specifically today, and natural selection. Now, I'm sure you've heard of this before, but I want to give some context to later conversations because maybe you've just talked about it before, but really natural selection can be quantified, which we're going to work on doing. But we have to give some background before we really get into that. So Charles Darwin looks like this. He's the bearded gentleman that is so famous for evolution. And we're going to talk a lot about him. But before him, he, like all scientists, stood on the shoulder of giants, and these were the giants that had to come before him. Basically, Lyell had to exist because he studied geology and figured out that Earth is very old. The common theory before these people was that the Earth was only a few thousand years old, but that just didn't work with his studies, and he found that the Earth is very, very old. Malthus, he helped come up with how populations of organisms grow. And then Lamarck, even though he was wrong, really got in to the scientific community and common understanding that evolution did happen. He thought that characteristics could be acquired, which we know is not the case during an animal's lifetime or an organism's lifetime. It does not acquire characteristics that get passed on, but he was still talking about evolution, which led to Darwin's journey, specifically on the HMS Beagle. You can see he traveled a long, long ways, circumnavigated the globe. Take that, flat earthers. He traveled from England down around South America. Galapagos, you will see, is out here, which really he did a lot of his studies on. Back around the globe, underneath Australia, underneath Asia, underneath Africa, and back to South America, and then back to England. And he was really getting at natural selection. Now, you've heard of it before, but there are a few things that they like to ask about that you need to understand about natural selection. First and foremost, there must be variation in a population. Natural selection won't occur if everybody is exactly the same. And from phenotypes like shell types that no organisms are exactly, even if they seem very similar, are not completely alike. This counts for clones in animals and identical twins in humans. There are slight differences that occur even beyond a completely genetic level to make organisms not completely alike. And in order for natural selection to occur, there must be reproduction, he found. Things have to make copies of themselves, or they won't, or natural selection doesn't occur. And specifically, for natural selection to occur, there must be overproduction of organisms. Some things are going to survive, some things are not. So you need some things that are not going to survive for natural selection to happen. And so he inferred that differential fitness must be occurring in the environment due to variation, meaning some things are different, and because they are different, they are going to survive and reproduce better. They will make more copies because they are better at surviving in that particular environment. It's specific to the environment in which they live. And that leads to a struggle for existence. So some things will survive. The bears that are better at catching fish will survive better than sad bear over here. And fish that are better at evading being caught will survive and reproduce better as well. So, inference too, and he couldn't measure this, but it has been supported by evidence since then, that geological time, billions of years, so remember we're talking geological time, not time as we experience it, but geological time, adaptations are going to lead to evolution of the population. Now, we have ways to detect organisms now where we can measure evolution. But at his time, he was not able to do that. He just had to have this inference that you see these blue, because they had better fitness, they are going to be changing the population. When this variation occurred, it led to better survival of blue, and as such, more blue in future generations. So he comes to two fundamental conclusions. We have a lot of diversity of life on Earth. Therefore, Earth has to be really, really old, not thousands of years, but billions of years old. And if organisms evolve from pre-existing organisms, then all organisms must share a universal common ancestor. Everything alive is related to everything else, in that we all can be traced back to a common ancestor. That's bananas, that's fungi, that's humans, that's cells, that's bacteria. We all must trace back to one common ancestor. And that leads to tree thinking, where the common ancestor is way, way back in time. This is, time being shown here. And this is the branching of organisms into different species that these ones would be alive at the time, or I guess these ones would be alive at the time of measurement. These ones here died off at some point, but everything can be traced back over a long period of time to a common ancestor. And this is a common ancestor, and these would be able to trace back to a common ancestor. A universal common ancestor. This tree thinking we call phylogenetics, which we will study later, but that's where this originated. Now, there were things unsettled by Darwin. He did not talk about the origin of life. He did not, even though he wrote a book entitled Origin of Species, he did not know how exactly speciation occurred, where species originated from, and he didn't know where variation or inheritance happened. Now, we know now, we understand genetics, and that is how we get our variation or inheritance. So we're going to talk a lot more about that in the future, but he didn't know that at the time. And that's where we're going to stop. I just want you to understand this about our background on Darwin, to know, because if you don't have a good historical context, then you will not possibly understand future context. So just kind of summarizing, natural selection, while you may understand it, you must have variation in a population, and you must have more organisms than can survive in that environment for natural selection to occur. These are the big things that I want you to take away, and hope that was helpful.